Good morning, Morai Rabotai. We are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orachaim, Hilchot Tefillah, Siman Sadi Bet, up to Sif Dalet, the Kuf Chaf He Amud Bet of the regular prints of Mishna Berura. Maran writes, Sarich lirchotz yadav b'mayim, ve'im yesh lo, ve'im en lo, sarich lachzor acharehem at parsa v'anemi likeshehu, הולך בדרך והמים נמצאים לפניו, אבל אם צריך לחזור לאחוריו למקום המים, עד מיל חוזר, יותר ממיל אינו חוזר, ואם מתיירש יעבור זמן התפילה, ינקה ידיו בשרור או באפר או בכל מידי דמנקי. The halacha stating that a person has to do netilat yadayim prior to tefillah. Every tefillah, and this is regardless of whether it's shacharit, mincha or arvit, a person should wash their hands prior to tefillah. Is part and parcel of the preparation that we have for davening for tefillah, as the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot, Daf Tetvav, I believe it is, Tetvav Amud Aleph. The Gemara says a person should wash. Now, if you don't have water, but you're on the path going, up to 72 minutes, Zeman Tefillah allowing, you have to wait, not daven, until you get water and wash your hands. And if you have to go out of your way, it means you're stationary somewhere, or you're going on a way, but you have to go out of the path, then until 18 minutes a person goes in order to be able to do Netilat Yadayim. This Netilat Yadayim, the Or Letzion writes, that does not have to necessarily be with a cup. It could just be with washing your hands, beserugin, under the flow of the water of the faucet. That also would be sufficient, unless a person wants to be makpid lachatchila. If you have a kli and you do it with the kli, it's better, right? It's the Letzion, to be hoshesh for the dat of the Rambam. Rambam, alav shalom, he paskined that the Netilat Yadayim for Tefillah has the same halachot and gedarim as the Netilat Yadayim for Seudah. Now for Seudah, everybody agrees that you need a kli, you need a vessel to pour the water. Over there it's not beserugin, it's 3 times and 3 times, but here would be the same boundaries of the halacha according to the Shita of Rambam. Now, even though that we don't paskin like the Rambam, but the Shita of Rambam is one of the Gdolei Arishonim. Hence, a person that has a kli, has the ability of washing their hands netilat yadayim with a kli, lechatchila they should do it, but it's not a necessity. You could wash it just under the sink, and that would be under the faucet, and that would be also okay. Says the Mishnah Berura, Hatam al ze ayin beresh Siman Dalet. We already have discussed the reason for this. Again, according to many Rishonim, Abu Draham, Drashba, like a Kohen that would do Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim prior to the avodah of the Beit HaMikdash, prior to working in the Beit HaMikdash. Here also, the Tefillah me'en temidin tikenum. It's a replacement of the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash, and hence, like a Kohen that would be metaher yadav, we would also do taharat yadayim. And of course, if the hand is dirty, so then you have additional reasons. V'gam betfilat mincha v'arvit tzarich netilah, as we will say later on in Shulchan Aruch, when he gets to the halachot of Shulchan Aruch, is written in the order of the day. Right? You wake up in the morning, you do netilat yadayim, the Birkot HaShachar, well, Zidan Tefillin, and Birkot HaShachar, Birkat Torah, and so on and so forth. Now we did the Brachot of Shema, we did Kaddish, Brachot of Shema, we did the Halachot of Shema until Siman Pehed, and now we started the Halachot of Tefillah. When we get later on through Shulchan Aruch in Siman Resh Lamed Gimal, Shulchan Aruch discusses this in Halachot of Tefilat Mincha as well, that the person should do Netilat Yadayim. So it's not just by Shaharit, it's not something specific that you do Netilat Yadayim in the morning for Shaharit. On the contrary, this becomes more relevant in many cases for Mincha and Arvit, because by Shaharit, your hands are clean. You just wash Netilat Yadayim. Many people do Netilat Yadayim after they're dressed up. This is something that we spoke about earlier on in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Dalet, when a person gets dressed. there's 6 different reasons in the Rishonim and the Poskim for the Netilat Yadayim of the morning. And to cover most of them, Chacham Ovadia used to do it himself also like that he would do an initial Netilat Yadayim, not necessarily even with a Kli, and then it would get dressed up and come downstairs, go to the kitchen sink, and he would do his Netilat Yadayim with the bracha over there when he was fully dressed. So many people already do that, and coming to shul, you haven't done anything, really. You haven't touched anything, especially if a person has taken a shower in the morning as well. So you're clean. You come, you don't need necessarily that time, but whereas when you come by minha, you've had a whole day, and you come in, and people don't have this mindfulness necessarily that you run into a minyan, and first thing you go wash your hands. That's something that needs more chizuk in the community. People are not aware of this halacha that you have to do Netilat Yadayim prior to the tefillah. But be that as it may, in Resh Lamed Gimel Sif Bet we're going to discuss this as well. Dat Rambam, דהיכא דצריך ליטול ידיו ולא נטל וגם לא ניקה אותן בשרור, Rambam holds that if you needed netilat yadayim and you didn't, and you also didn't clean your hands, as the Shulchan Aruch said at the end, said if you don't have water available, just rub your hands with something that's midi de menakit, something that could clean, and that would be with the Eved also fine in a scenario that you don't have water in your reach. But Rambam holds if you needed netilat yadayim, you didn't do netilah, and you didn't clean your hands, then you are in trouble, says the Rambam. And you didn't do it, afilu b'di eved and tefilato tefillah. Even though that you already have davened, that tefillah is not a tefillah. V'sarich iyu ledina. Halachically speaking, says the Mishnah Berura, whether or not we will go with the Rambam to go back and daven again, sarich iyun. And says the Mishnah Berura, if you take a look at the Berura Halacha, the long one that you have over here, he holds that lechatchila a person should not do that, but b'diavad, if you already davened, you don't go back and daven again. It's not a necessity for a person to go back and daven one more time. So it says the Mishnah Berura, ve'en niguv ma'akev bazeh. Unlike the netilat yadayim of Seudah, by netilat yadayim of Seudah, drying your hands is part and parcel of the netilat yadayim, is ma'akev, because you cannot eat bread with wet hands. So it's part of the netilat yadayim, part of the preparation for Seudah is to dry your hand. But over here, it's not ma'akev. If you don't have a towel, if you don't have something to dry your hands, you can wash and stand to tefillah. There's no isur to say brachot when your hands are still wet. It's a good idea to dry them, but it's not a necessity. And this that we say you need to do netilat yadayim is when you know that your hands are dirty. But stam yadayim, the Shulchan Aruch in later on in Sif Hey is going to be next Sif is going to be a little more mekel, as we will see. Now, this you have to go after them. You have to go after water to find 18 minutes out of your way, 72 minutes on your way. Says the Mishnah Berura, if you would need afterwards to go yechidi, or you can't reach your destination when you go out of your way 18 minutes, and now you have to come back 18 minutes. So that, 36 minutes that you're going to be out of your way, that could make the difference for a person to get to their destination while still day, versus getting there at night, which we said before. A person le'olam yikares adam bechitov, yitza adam bechitov, yikares bechitov. We always want to travel during the day. Then en sarich lachzor kalal. Then you are absolved from this, because that's an overriding factor that would dictate basically that you don't have to go back and wash your hands again. Those things are less relevant right now in our generation, as we have discussed this before. A person that's going on his way, Shtabra writes, Holech dino bechol ze kemalech beraglav. When you are riding on a ride, you're in carriage, you're in a car, same halacha applies as going on foot. And therefore, will be 18 minutes of a drive. 18 minutes of ride would be the same thing, even though that you could accomplish much more ground, so to speak, distance with a car than you would be on foot. That's only if when you go there by 18 minutes, it's not a safek. You know, bevadai, 18 minutes away from here, there is water. Or less than 18 minutes from here, there's water. If you say, well, I know that there is a settlement, there's something there 18 minutes from here, but I'm not sure if they have water. Probably they have water, but I'm not sure. Then, misafek, you don't have to go out of your way and to find water. You could just be mekel to clean your hands and daven where you're at. Certainly, if a person is sitting at home, that is considered the bevadai hayav lachzor lechatchila achar mayim. You have to also go out of your way up to 18 minutes to find water. Many hold that 18 minutes itself is already considered more than a meal. In other words, it's up to 18 minutes. Up to a meal, but not a meal included. And Shulchan Aruch at the end said, if you go into miss Zman Tefillah, then don't do it. If you're going to completely miss Zman Tefillah, then just clean your hands and daven right now with just rubbing your hand against something that cleans. And the Bach writes that if a person has time, you still don't need, if the time of Tefillah is going to pass, let's say you're in a place that you have a minyan that are davening, but if there's no time, that even though that you have time, but you go into mis tefillah besibur, then the Bach writes that you don't have to go back. In other words, you don't miss tefillah, the time of the tefillah, but you'll miss the time of the tefillah betzibur. Then also the Bach says you don't have to go back. You just clean your hands and you daven. Now over here, the Kaf HaChaim writes, even though the Mishna says many poskim hold that meal already is considered more than what you need to be toreach, the Kaf HaChaim writes that meal itself is considered also part of it. So up to 18 minutes, and that included, you still have to go, but nothing more than that. So it says,
the whole purpose of this is for cleanliness.
Can you?
The purpose of this is for cleanliness. That your hands should be clean, or for kedusha.
Well, it depends. The main thing is cleanliness, but there are reasons for kedusha as well. The dimyon that you have to a kohen by avodah is not just cleanliness; it's kedusha dayim v'raglayim. But the simple halachic thing of it is the minimum. It would be cleanliness. So therefore, Maran says, if you can't do Hazaku Baruch, you have to even go 18 minutes out of your way to do it. But if you can't, then at the very least you clean your hands b'midi de menakeh. Yeah, or you could even do it with sand. Well, on Shabbat you can't do it with sand, right? Yeah, seror, with a stone, with a sand, you rub it against something that cleans. So the Kaf HaChaim says, well, on Shabbat that you can't do that because they're considered muktzeh, then you could do it with a wall, says the Kaf HaChaim, with a pillar, with a wall, or with your clothing. Hand sanitizer is considered more like water. That's certainly midi de minake if you have something to dry it with afterwards as well. That's considered, most of them are considered liquid. And there used to be the ones that were considered were meant to be also a lotion, so they were much more samich, they were much thicker, which would actually create a very serious question on Shabbat, whether or not it's mutar to use them. Still, some of them are questionable on Shabbat. When COVID hit, this became like one of the things that he needed to know, because everyone was using a sanitizer every 25 seconds, and that became a very big question, a need to know whether or not it's considered memareach on Shabbat or not, and what's considered liquid, what's not considered liquid, because liquid would be fine. But again, many of the hand sanitizers are not fully liquid, but they're also not really solid. So where do you draw a line exactly? What's considered liquid became a big question. But that's for Hilchot Shabbat shir. So says the Mishnah Berura, Yenakei Yadav Retzor Lomar the En Lo Lahazor Az Achar Mayim Shema Yavor Zeman. You may miss the Zman Tefillah. You don't have to go after water. V'choshken in Yer Kriyat Shema. That's even for Tefillah. Certainly for Kriyat Shema would be the same halacha as well. And you don't have to. The Kaf HaChaim also writes this, but for Shema, if you don't have water, you don't have to go after them at all, and you just clean your hands with whatever cleans. Like nowadays, we don't have grease necessarily on our hands, most of the people, so it's much easier to do on the begadim. Back in the day, they would not want to do it on the begadim lechatchila because the hands perhaps were much dirtier, and it would be easier to do it with the sand or with the wall or with pebbles and so on and so forth, which would be not damaging to their assets. But nevertheless, says the Shulchan Aruch in Seif Hey now, the second part of this halacha, Rachatz yadav shacharit v'yisiach dato. If you washed your hands in the morning, shacharit, as we spoke a few minutes ago, that you do that normally, routinely, and then hisiach dato, you came to Amud Yomi, you've been doing stuff for the past hour before you start shacharit. So you may have scratched your head, you may have touched an area of the body that normally is covered and has milmule ze'ah. You may have tied your shoes or touched your shoes or socks without noticing it. So your hisiach, you took your mind off of the cleanliness of your hands. Tzrichim netilah litfilah. Then you need an additional netilah right before tefillah. So in case of the people who are learning, have a shiur an hour, 45 minutes before shacharit, after they're done with that, again, if they have not kept their hands clean, sometimes if you're the person that's giving the shiur and you're being recorded, so you're very much mindful of what you do during that hour. So you may say, okay, I know for sure I did not do anything that would necessitate, check the video, right? Necessitate Netilat Yadayim. But if a person doesn't know, then you're Mesiach Da'at. And if you're Mesiach Da'at, then it would necessitate a new Netilat Yadayim for Tefillah, if you have water, of course. Even though that you don't for sure know that you touched something. So it's Stam Yadayim, we call them. You don't know that it's Tam. You remember an hour ago you didn't Netilat Yadayim, but within the hour, you're not really on guard to keep them clean. In that case, again, if you have water, you do Netilat Yadayim, but no bracha. Even though that's Netilat Yadayim of Shaharit, you already have lost a bunch of the Rishonim that we spoke about earlier on in Netilat Yadayim. For instance, this is generally speaking known as the Machloket Rosh and Rashba. When Rosh says the reason of Netilat Yadayim in the morning is because you've touched areas that are dirty, Rashba says no, because you're Bria Hadasha. You consider Bria Hadasha, you already did in the morning once. You're no longer Bria Hadasha in the past hour because you took your mind off of your hands. So therefore you can't say bracha, it's a fake brachot for sure. And in this case, that you don't for sure know that your hands are dirty, as we said a minute ago, if you don't have mayim mezumanim, if you don't have water prepared for you, and tzarich lachazor velitol, you don't have to go back and do netilat yadayim. And even if your hands were dirty and you are doing netilat yadayim for tefillah, eno mevarech. You don't say bracha, as again we discussed before in the halachot of netilat yadayim, to which the Mishnah Berura writes, Isiach da'ato, that you took your mind off means sheiflik arbe ben hanetilah letfilah. It's been a time lapse, a significant time lapse before you daven, since you have washed your hands. At sheisiach da'ato, your mind hasn't been focused on the cleanliness of your hand. And for sure, by mincha time, like you've been out and about for hours, working and doing stuff, And if you don't remember what the status of your hand is, you ought to assume that they need netilat yadayim, so therefore you have to wash your hands before tefillah. Tzrichim netilah dekevan shisiach dato mishemiratan. Once you took your mind off of the shmirah, yadayim maskanyotin. Our hands are always busy. We're always doing things with our hands, and therefore we are concerned. Maybe you touched an area that's not clean, and therefore you should wash netilat yadayim. But for Torah and for saying brachot, you don't need to. That's only for tefillah. But if you want to sit and learn, you want to say Shema, you want to say brachot, you want to say sha'akol, then stam yadayim kasherot. Then stam yadayim is good. Unless you know that you've touched something that necessitates netilat yadayim, you don't necessarily need to wash your hands. But the Pri Megadim writes earlier on that for Kriyat Shema you need it. Kriyat Shema is important, it's the Oraita. So the Pri Megadim is a little bit more stringent when it comes to Shema out of all the other brachot. Now, we mentioned that you don't need to go after water if you don't have it available. Im ein lo mayim mezumanim en tzarich lachazor. And on that, it says in the Mishna Berura, afal piken tzarich lenakot otan b'miti de menake. Still have to rub it against something. That much you could always do. You don't need water for that, so you should do it if possible. The dilma mudbak bo me'at so'a. Maybe you have something stuck to it from before. O ze'a al yedei hanegya b'mkomot hamechusin. Or you have touched areas that are full of dirty sweat residue. And you'll be cleaning it through, rubbing it against whatever it is that you have available. Maran is only mekel, only lenient when you don't know what the status of your hands are. Maybe they're clean, maybe not, I don't remember. But if you remember that you've touched something that's makom metunaf, you've gone to bathroom and you washed yourself, you touched your areas that are covered normally. Certainly if you went to bathroom, you used the bathroom, then even by mincha you have to go after the water, because then you know for sure that you've touched. So comes out the halacha that for a regular mincha arvit, you come to shul, you don't know, you don't remember, it's time you've been out and about, then a person should do netilat yadayim because we have water available, Baruch Hashem. If you're in a place that you don't have water available, you're in the middle of on a hike somewhere, whatever it is, and you want to daven mincha, if you don't have water, you don't know where to get water, then you could daven just by cleaning your hands, right? But if you know for sure that you have used the bathroom and you didn't have water to wash it, so then you need to go after water. You have to go spend a little time looking for water, and even if it's out of your way by 18 minutes, you still need to go get water and wash your hands before you daven, because there in that case, bevadai that your hands need netilat yadayim, and hence you have to go after it. This concludes basically Seif. Hey, let's get one more Seif in as well. Haomet b'tfilah v'nizkar shenaga b'makom metunaf. Now, what if I forgot about this? Especially like when you try to accustom yourself for mincha arvit, it takes time until a person makes it a routine. So imagine you're standing in Shemona Esrei, you say, "Oh, gee, I forgot to wash my hands." Now, what do you do now? Says Maran, Nizkar shenaga b'makom metunaf. You remember that you actually, for sure, don't have clean hands because you touched something that was dirty. You used the bathroom, or you touched your body in an area that was always covered, and then hence you need netilat yadayim. So what you do is you stop davening where you are, where you remember, and dai ben nikayon afar osrorot. And you bend, you take some dirt, some pebbles, and you rub your hands with it. Or again, nowadays that your hands are not that dirty, I mean physically dirty, you could just rub it against your clothing from back and forth, and that would be also sufficient. Dai benikayon afar oserorot. Or if you're next to the wall, you could just rub it against the wall and clean it as well, and that would be sufficient. Says the Mishnah Berura, Aval im omet b'kriyat Shema. That's only for tefillah. If you're in kriyat Shema, or in Psuke de Zimra, of course, there's no prohibition against stopping and walking. It's not like in Tefillah that you're omed b'fnei melech, you're not supposed to walk. In Shema, you can walk. So stop where you are. Go and wash your hands. You know, if you have water available, go and wash your hands. Whereas in Tefillah, even if you have a sink next to you, you're not supposed to be walking in the middle of Shemona Esrei. So you'll just clean your hands with your begadim, and that would be sufficient. And the reason that Maran brings a case that you for sure know that you touched somewhere dirty, Mishum delachatchila asur liga betfila gufa, ochtil kaman, avalu adin im naga betfila gufa. If you forgot and you're not focused, you're not mindful, and in the duration of the tefillah, even if you did wash netilat yadayim before mincha, but all of a sudden you start scratching your head, which you have long hair and you haven't taken a shower lately, so that's considered mekomot mechusim. When you have kibbutz arot, that's considered also an activity that would necessitate netilat yadayim, but you're in the middle of tefillah. You're not supposed to do that in tefillah, of course, but if mindlessly you did it, then you stop, you rub your hands, you clean it, and then you go on with tefillah. And B'ezras Hashem, Sif Zayin is what we're going to continue in the days to come. Chazak u'beruch.